Do you know what percent of the federal spending last year
No,
was borrowed money?
no.
Borrowed money.
Borrowed, okay.
Borrowed money.
From like
43
China and all these other
Yeah.
Okay,
China, Japan,
Mhm.
Saudi Arabia,
right.
43.3%.
My goodness.
43%. This year, it's 39.9%. 39.9%.
Well, I read yesterday.
So,
Yes.
yeah, I usually beat up on the federal. Been doing a little bit of city and school stuff here lately. But these people, they're living in some kind of Taj Mahal. It's the famous line, "Let 'em eat cake." They don't care. You
Well,
and
you
I
know what,
work
Sean?
night and day to pay off a mortgage,
Yes.
and they're over here building up a huge mortgage that we don't even see coming.
Well, you have to. I lived back in Washington D.C. for about 5 years, and the thing is, there's this mindset in the Beltway. They do not see what's outside of that Beltway.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, they live high and they spend wildly and they make good money, and anybody who works for the government is privileged.
Yeah.
And so they don't see us. They don't see the little guy that makes up the large part of the United States. So they honestly, in most cases, I know it sounds dumb, but they don't see it. They don't
Yeah.
know about it. You know, they can be told it, but because they're living high and everybody around them's living high, it's like they're blinded.
Yeah.
Like the blinders on, and they're unable to see sometimes what they're doing. There's not. One thing I did find when I was back there, there were a lot of good people back there, but there are an awful lot of those that are not good and who do not wish our country to succeed.
Yeah.
So, you know, one of the things that I just would like to mention today, and then I'll let you take most of this, is that, you know, over the years as we've taught, one of the things I've learned is that there's so many things out there. It's so overwhelming. It's in education. It's in our food. It's in our water. It's in our treaties. It's all these conspiracies, whether people like to call them that or not. It's so in depth now. There's such a web that we cannot say, oh, it's too overwhelming. We can't do anything. I think what we have to do is, like my mother used to say, choose your poison. Pick one and then go after that. If you're someone who can sit with Judicial Watch and watch what's going on in the courts with our local judges, which right now I've had some guests on saying we've had some major problems. You know, we elect people and we don't know their backgrounds, we don't know if they're liberal, they're conservative, and nobody's watching what they're doing. They just get reelected and reelected. But it's not just that. I mean, if you're good in education, you go down there, read the books that your children are reading. In other words, pick something where you can do something about it. And especially
There's
our
too many
local
targets
folks.
to
Yes, you
say
can't.
I'm going to shoot.
Exactly, and don't let it shut you down.
Yeah.
That's what Satan wants, is for us to be shut down.
It's like
Now-
the general in the Battle of the Bulge. We got them right where we want them. We can shoot in any direction.
That's right.
We
Well,
got enemies everywhere.
Well, we do. And the thing is that people may not believe this, but one of the things you have to understand, Hans and I have been studying this for over 20 years.
Yeah.
And, you know, that makes a difference, Hans. There are some people, in fact, I think it was Joel Skousen, in his wonderful, he's got a website that is just absolutely wonderful. Type in Joel Skousen, it'll take you right to it.
Yeah, I've
But
read a lot of his stuff.
He's good.
Yeah.
But one of the things he said, and I really agreed with him, is he said, for whatever reason, some people are just not prepared to hear and know what you and I know. And he said, so don't push it on them. Don't overwhelm them with it. Give them a little bit at a time, and certainly don't get divorced over these things, because you're fighting in your families
Yeah.
over what's conservative and what's liberal.
So
and
many
et cetera.
people, they hear us talk and they think we're like Ducky Lucky. You know, we got an acorn landed on our head and put us on tilt, so we can't deal with the real world. We don't see what's really going on because we had an acorn land on us, and they don't see what the prophets have.
Well, you know, I think
Said too.
I didn't know it either. And I have to admit, 20 years ago, I cannot say that I knew any of this. And when I started getting people that came on the air, and I had to read books, and I had to think, okay, now if this guy is really
that
saying
really
what he
real,
said,
huh?
exactly, then I had to go to the internet or to, you know, Freedom of Information Act, or, you know, anything that I could find to see if these things were true. And once I started keeping a 3-ring binder, you know, and I'm going, oh my gosh.
You start accumulating a lot of evidence.
Evidence, exactly. Evidence, and following the paper trail, the money trail sometimes, whatever. And the more I did that, the more I could see that, my gosh, what they talked about in the Book of Mormon is what's on top of us right now,
Yeah.
right here and now. And people say, okay, that's true, but what do we do about it? Well, today I think Hans and I'd like to talk about that just for a minute. I received 2 letters, and I'd like to read them. One was from
Yeah,
a
go ahead.
gentleman named Fred Grains, and he's talking about taxes. He said, "Dear Donna, some of us would appreciate it if you would bring up the subject of taxes. We called the city and was told that our taxes were lowered this year. And when we did our homework, we found that that was untrue. Now, if they use the word tax, then they can make it look like the taxes are going down. But if you add in the hidden taxes, which are charged by our local governments and telephone charges and others, we see the words fees, bonds, licenses, assessments, etc., all of which are represented as not being taxes when they really are. For instance, fishing and hunting licenses used to be $5 to $10, and now they're up, some of them, to $40 and above, depending on the type of hunting you may want. We've had an increase of 17% on our utility bill recently, and the city council has ignored the fact that Provo bought their own utility company years ago and were promised that it would never be sold off or the money's used for anything but to help Provo property owners to keep their utility bills down. When I called the city, the person who discussed this with me acted very disgusted and asked me how I thought Provo would pay for its roads and other needs if they didn't use this money. And my reply was that this money was appropriated for one thing and one thing only. And if they were going to change that appropriation, then they needed to get our permission before they absconded with our money and redirected it into unnecessary projects and bigger government. However, I realized that if they did that, then they would have to explain to the taxpayers exactly where the money was being spent. An example of the waste would be the 4 courthouses within a few blocks of one another. In doing some research on the vote for the Provo Rec Center, it appears that we have an information problem. Out of approximately 61,035 registered voters in Provo, which could include students, meaning not all those were property owners who will actually pay for it in property taxes, only 20%, or 15,982, actually voted. And 2, out of the 61,000, I'll just say that, prospective voters, only 9,000 of those voted yes for Proposition 1, which means that only 15% of the registered voters really wanted the rec center, not 64% as was represented. That would leave 85% of the homeowners who don't want any more taxes. In my mind, if you don't care enough about something, a person doesn't bother to show up unless it's assumed their vote is generally a no, not a yes. Thus, in essence, the property owners overwhelmingly do not want a Provo Rec Center and more additional taxes, especially when we still owe $1 million on a bond for the Provo Library. We need another vote for or against the Rec Center, and we need accurate figures. Who are the actual homeowners who are going to pay for these taxes? Not just people are going to use it. Who's going to be responsible? As for the Provo Library, I saw an article in the Daily Universe, he says, which is entitled Provo Library Escapes Economy Crash. In spite of the budget cuts, the article says that they were able to stay afloat because of the funding from increased Provo property taxes. Now, there's a good point here. Libraries and rec centers do not run themselves. After we pay for the building, we also have to pay a staff to keep it open and purchase whatever is necessary to keep it in good shape and pay taxes on it. The property owners here in Provo still need to pay off that $1 million. Well, that's shaky as to whether or not in the years to come it's even going to stay open. And now we're being asked to take on a $39 million rec center, which we really don't need. And how in the world are we going to pay for this if we go into a depression or a double-dip recession? Please take a moment.
These people here are like our Washington friends.
Yes.
You know, we're in serious trouble. And what do? Let's put another $39 million mortgage on the city for fun and games.
Which is stupid. Now, this, by the way, was written by Fred Grains, and I wanted to note that.
Mm-hmm.
But I just wanted to tell you that after I got this, I actually called the tax people, or excuse me, the voting place. I'm sorry, I can't think of what it's called now. And
county?
asked if these figures were correct, and they said they were. But his twist on it's a little different than those that were given that's coming out of the city council office and whatever. His concern, generally speaking, is that only a few people are going to make money off of this, and the rest of us are just going to pay and pay and pay.
Yeah.
How do you? I can see
It's
his
like the
concerns
golf
because
course
I
fought
actually
in Orem
yes.
years and years ago. Not that many people golf, but the golfers scream and yell, "We want inexpensive golf," so the whole city helped fund our golfing fees, and so they did.
Yes. This is another real short one, and then I'll get off this, I promise. But this was from Marvin Molnex. And he said, I thought you might find this of interest on it. It mentions non-payment of rents in Provo. The comments are very good. In light of the fact that the burden of taxes falls on the property owners, this must be of grave concern to everyone. If property owners cannot pay their mortgages because people can't or won't pay their rent, how are those property owners going to pay taxes or help support all the new entitlements for illegals and any new building projects in the city in general? And knowing that there are a whole slew of new taxes disguised here, he's pretty sharp too, disguised as fees, assessments, bonds, and licenses, etc., everywhere, then it seems obvious that the people will be tricked into more debt to sustain this city and others. I read an article which indicated that Americans used to be the most honest of all people and were willing to pay their fair share. But since the leaders in national government, the states, and local governments have run amok with spending, people are finding every way they can to get out of debt or taxes, even if it's dishonest. It makes it even more disheartening when we realize that so many of these dishonest people are LDS, as the majority of those who live here are LDS. I'm glad I live outside of Provo, but even then I have talked with many business owners in the surrounding areas who were or are facing the same problem, and they have told me that the number of bad checks which they receive every day from what appear to be honest-looking people has been one of the main causes that are going out of business. Note how many businesses will no longer accept checks.
Yeah, you keep seeing these signs popping up, we don't accept checks.
He said, a sad commentary on the residents of Utah. A Zion people? Not yet.
Yeah.
Well, but what I'm seeing from these people is a deep concern. And I know that myself and some of my friends did almost all of our investing in Provo. And the taxes this year were, I can't even begin to tell you the amount that were paid. So one had to pay $18,000. Can you imagine paying $18,000 for 1 year of taxes? And that's only property tax. That doesn't include the list. In fact, a listener sent me, and I tried to find it today, but I will get that to you. It was over 40 taxes that we pay every day.
Tucked away here and there.
Hidden taxes.
Yeah, anybody who ever looks at their cell phone bill when they get it, their utility
yes.
bill, I mean, there's the bill, and then there's about 8 things underneath it.
Yes, but you know, really,
This tax, that tax, this fee, that fee.
I don't laugh about that. I get mad.
Yeah, well,
I just go, what happened?
Well,
Where
I'd
did we
cry,
get-"
but tears stain my clothes, and so I try to maintain a little more humorous attitude.
Well, you know, Hans, remember what Brigham Young said about taxes? You remember?
No, go ahead.
He said that people would rather pay taxes than their tithing. In other words, you know, I think the reason that they do that is, for instance, the rec center. One of the ways that it was presented was it's only going to cost you 1 tank of gas a month to keep that going.
Yeah, 1 tank of gas.
How much is 1 tank of gas? It's some of them. Look at these big vehicles.
Well, you got a 10,
$100.
15, or 20 gallon.
Yeah, you know, but the point is that it's we just need to tell our people who are overset. We're not being negative when we say, do we really need this? We're trying to be frugal because we can see, some people can see that the economy is not going to change yet, not for some time. They're talking 5 to 7 years. Do we want to be bound by all these terrible taxes?
It's an economic slavery.
Of course.
And you just have to stand up and smell the roses, and hopefully our leaders will do it. That's something that I've thought was interesting. Another statistic I was reading yesterday was that 4 or 5 years ago, before this problem started, we were saving Americans a little under 3%
Yeah.
of our income. Now it's up to 6%. And so as things get tighter and tighter, people are spending less and less. And of course, some people are saying, go out and spend. That helps the economy because 70% of the engine that creates taxes and jobs is spending. You got to get out there and spend. And so when we cut back, we start saving twice what we used to save. That's going to hurt the economy, quote unquote. But people are saving. But the thing I don't understand, why is there a disconnect? And it just happened in Provo. It's about to happen next year in Orem Alpine School District. Why is there a disconnect? We realize, hey, things are getting tougher. We cannot buy all this stuff to the tune of 6% isn't that great, but when you go up from 3 to 6%, that's a dramatic change in people's thinking, what they're saving. Why do we continue to elect city officials, county officials, school people who don't think that what they do with government is what they should do is not the same as what they should do in their private lives? I mean, you look at the school district, 6 years ago, they had $200 million in debt. 2006, they talked us into $230 million more debt. Now, next year, they're going to come back for another $230 million more. So we're going up roughly $200 million to $400 million to $600 million. And they're not thinking, hey, this is going to be a burden on people who are struggling to get out of debt, who are having a hard time keeping jobs. Foreclosures. Maybe you saw this, 40% of all homes sold last year in this country were foreclosures, repos. And last month, the number of foreclosures for 2010 exceeded the number for 2009. And we say we're getting better. And a month ago, we exceeded the number we had the prior year. And yet, these people, the school district, the city, which you've just talked about, and we got the same problem in Orem, they just think they can keep spending and spending and spending.
Well, one of the things that was said to me when I expressed my concerns to the city was, well, the church is self-spending, and as long as they are, we'll follow their lead. And I shook my head. I just couldn't believe it. I said, wait a minute. Are we on the same page? I said, the church has stopped spending. It has frozen jobs now. Yeah. And when people retire, they don't fill them. That happened a couple of years ago.
I was trying to get a friend of mine. He couldn't get in up there. They froze wages,
Well, but it's not that. It's all over. I mean, I have mission presidents and people who write me from all over who tell me that, the church has cut back on the amount of cars that the missionaries can drive. I mean, there's just all kinds of things that they have cut back on out there. And, of course, they're building wards and stakes and whatever, because that's what we do. That's what the church does.
Yeah, we're not going into debt. We're going to stay inside what we have.
And what have we been told by our prophets over and over and over again? Get out of debt. Get out of debt. Well, we can't get out of debt if the city and the state and all these people are irresponsible with the way they spend our money.
Yeah.
Because we can't pay taxes. Eventually, Hans, somebody's got to pay for this.
Yeah.
I was reading where the national debt that each one of us, I couldn't believe this, was almost $500,000 an individual right now. Now, what's going to happen? What's going to happen to our private property? This is what's happening in the Communist Manifesto. Was some of the planks of the Communist Manifesto. It's the abolition of private property. Yeah. Well, but how do they do that? Yeah. How do you abolish private property, Hans? How does the communist do that? Through taxes.
Yeah, a piece at a time.
By gaining control of the banks. The banks start having liquidity problems. So what do? They foreclose on you, even if you're making payments. I have friends of ours who are making payments to the bank, but their loan it's time to roll over, and they won't roll them over without adding a $10,000 fee to roll this over. And this is an actual case. And raising their interest rate to 8.5% when they were paying 3.5%. Plus, I mean, it was so ridiculous. The people couldn't sign the contract because they couldn't possibly afford to do that. So we lose our right to our private property the moment we allow these things to happen.
We get in over our heads, and then when hard times come, I just wish our government officials would see it. Our school leaders, our city people. Why is it that they think they can continue to just keep spending? But of course, it starts at the federal level. The big brothers, who, like I say, last year were 43%. This year, 39% of every dime they spend is borrowed money.
Well, in my mind, I think the answer is you have to bring it back to the states.
Yeah.
We have to take away the power of the big government now. It's gotten way too big. And bring it back to the states where we can evaluate the entitlements that we give out. We're not opposed to giving out some entitlements, but we have to use wisdom.
Yeah.
We have to do this.
Did you know, here's another statistic I put together.
Okay.
If you did away with all the entitlement programs in the federal government, Social Security is one of the biggest ones, Medicare, Medicaid, these entitlement programs, that is 38.2% of the federal budget. So if you where they're spending 39.9% above. If you continued to collect all the Medicare payments and all the Social Security payments, continue to collect those from all the people, and you didn't send any of those checks out to anybody that's collecting Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, any of these entitlement programs, you still couldn't balance the budget.
No.
Can you imagine how
Well,
many
it's getting
people?
worse every day.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we can certainly see how we're being moved by some very wicked people. And the thing is it's not just wickedness, it's really totally evil. And I think when you ask the question, why do the people in this local area, why can't they see this? I think
Yeah, we
have
vote for
this
leaders as
inability.
good as those in Washington, D.C., like
Yeah, but-
Obama's. Just put more debt on the people. We don't have to change the way we work.
But I think the reason, Hans, at least I've thought a lot about this, is that these are not inherently bad people. We have good people out there who are really deceived, but I don't think that they understand evil. Not real evil. As we're good LDS people, we're good Christian people out there too as well.
Yeah.
And we don't understand how evil things can get. When you look back on Stalin and Hitler and all this, how in the world were they able to murder millions of people? How did they get away with that? Because none of them ever thought, they couldn't comprehend true evil. And that's what we're faced with today in our world, is Satan is fighting hard. This is the last days. And this true
And another
evil
thing
is
people
gonna
don't
move.
see, it was economic chaos
Exactly.
that brought those people
Yes.
to the front. It's what happened in France. It's what happened with Germany. It's what happened with Russia. You create economic chaos. You create a vacuum to where people are scared, don't know which way to run, and then you show up with the total socialist who says, trust me,
Yes.
I'll bring you peace.
Well, you know what's happening now is because there are so many out of work and more that will be out of work, that we will say, we'll do anything just so we have a job.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what they did in many of the communist countries, and why they were taken over is because they were willing to sell their freedom just to make sure that they ate. And then what did the communists do? They took away their food.
Yeah. They give them control, and then the reign of terror, once they get it, starts. And we like to think it can't happen here.
Do you really believe that the Germans or the Russians or any of these communist countries ever thought in their wildest dreams that it was going to happen there?
What would happen happened.
That there would be millions, literally millions,
Yeah.
taken off?
Yeah, this economic thing, most people don't see the seriousness of it. In fact, let me read a quote right now that I wasn't going to read till the very end of the show about this economic thing. This is out of J. Reuben Clark. This is out of a book my father gave me. I've read parts of this quote before. Mother gave this one back in 1962. It's out of Stand Fast by Our Constitution. And he talks about America.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks about where was the Garden of Eden?
Right.
Here.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks about when the Lord decided to split up the earth, put the ocean in there. He floated Noah
That's right.
and the survivors to the other side. And then he said, we'll just bring special groups of people over to this land.
Mm-hmm.
And then he explained to them, okay, we wiped out the whole bunch with Noah. Now we separated the land. We're going to have people over there. We'll bring special groups over here. So when the brother of Jared was complaining about the Tower of Babel and people are losing their languages and I love you, can you help me? And my family and my friends, the Lord said, yeah, I've got a special land. And you're going to get to take your brother and their families, you're going to get to go over there. So the Jaredites came over here. He told them, this is the choicest place on the face of the earth, but you have to serve the God of the land.
That's right.
And they came over. They were here 2,000 years, and they were wiped out. Then Lehi was told the same thing. There's terrible things coming here. Terrible things coming. And get your family, get your sons, get them their wives, get you a set of scriptures. I'm taking you to the promised land. But we know that story. They lasted 1,000 years. And the Mulekites, we don't have their history. They came over and joined with the Nephites, but they must have a similar history because they were allowed to come here. And the Lord says, I only bring people to this land that I bring. You know, that's how they're going to get here. I'm going to bring them here. And of course, they went out. So there's Noah, Jaredites, Nephites, Mulekites, and now we've got us, 1492, and we've started out. And I wanted to read a quote here from J. Reuben Clark out of this book that I mentioned earlier. And I want you to listen to this. It's a longer paragraph, but I want you to think about economics. I want you to think about spending. Usually when we think about fullness of iniquity and all these civilizations going in the tank, we think, well, they're a bunch of blankety-blank adulterers. They're fornicators. They're thieves. They're liars. They're the worst people. These are the sins that brought on this fullness of iniquity. You know, that said these civilizations have to go. Now, I want to give you what J. Reuben Clark, his take on this. Let me give you his definition of a fullness of iniquity. What happened? We are not given the step. This is, again, out of his Stand Fast by Our Constitution, page 177. We are not given the step-by-step backsliding of this Jareditic civilization till it reached the social and governmental chaos the record sets out. But those steps seem wholly clear from the results. Put into modern terms. Now he's saying, okay, and this he later says this is the Nephite too. First, there was a forsaking of the righteous life and the working of wickedness. Okay, that's how it starts, wickedness. Then must have become the extortion and oppression of the poor by the rich. Then retaliation and reprisal by the poor against the rich. Then would come a cry, and this is where we are today. Then would come a cry to share the wealth, which should belong to all. Then the easy belief that society owed every man a living, whether he worked or not. Then the keeping of a great body of idlers. Then when the community revenues failed to do this, as they always have failed and always will fail, a self-helping by one to the goods of his neighbor, and finally when the neighbor resisted, as resist he must, or starve with his family, then death to his neighbor and all that belonged to him. This was the decreed fullness of iniquity. So he breaks this down as an economic thing. This was the fullness of iniquity. It's an economic thing. Yes, we do the sinning. We do the adultery, we do the fornicating, the lying, the stealing. But it becomes an economic thing. We turn to
It's
living.
power.
Pardon?
It's a seeking for power.
Yeah, and it's happening in our school districts, where they're going to run us up 200, 400 million, and next year another 230 million. It's happening in the cities.
Where's this? Is this Alpine? Are you talking
Alpine
about?
School District, yeah.
Say that figure again. That just seemed unbelievable to me.
Well, 4 years ago, they got us to vote for a $230 million bond. It's similar, like you could run similar numbers, like you said, 15%. Well, we could do the same thing out here in Orem. For instance, statewide here in Utah, this election we had a couple of weeks ago, 34.3% of registered voters voted. 34.3 of the registered. I got a lot of neighbors that I know are not registered. Just a few blocks from me, there's areas where I bet you wouldn't find 1 in 3 or 4 in those neighborhoods that even register. But 34.3% even bothered to vote. And a lot of those that bother to vote are people that want the fun and games. You know, they want the golf course, the rec center. They want more government employees. You know, and we're going to have another $230 million bond this next year. And instead of figuring out how do we make do, how do we go back to reading, writing, and arithmetic instead of, I don't know if you've seen the school thing that the high school send home for these kids, all the schools they can sign up. It looks like what I looked at when I went to BYU 40 years ago.
What do you mean? I mean,
all the different subjects, all the different classes they can take.
Yes.
This isn't reading, writing, and arithmetic. It's they're just having a field day, and what they want to do is continue to spend for everything under the sun, and say we've got to keep this going. And you and I, we say, okay, I can't take a vacation this year. I can't do this. I can't do that. What do the schools do? What do the cities do? Let's bond them another $230 million. Let's Let's bond them another $39 million.
Well, you know, we were
They
talking,
don't get the message.
we were talking about this on the air the other day about the fact that there's so much dumbing down going in our schools right now, and the fact that they have so many programs now that are making sure you're politically correct. And if teachers, Hans, decide they don't want to teach this, what's happening is the government is now coming out with a test that the kids have to be given to make sure their teachers are putting forth this agenda that they want to put forth.
Yeah.
So it's very evil, and it's very difficult. And the money, the other thing that was brought out was the fact that anytime we want to tax people more, we always use our children as the excuse.
Right. We got to do it for the children.
We got to do it for children. Got to do it for the families. We have to do it. Where we're not saying, I don't know, Hans. Are you and I of a generation that doesn't that we're non-progressive? I mean, I'd love to see things happen, but in today's society, I think we have to look beyond what we want and really, truly, again, as I said earlier, what do we need?
Yeah.
And I don't want to be in debt millions of dollars.
No, and they don't need to do it. They need to start thinking outside the box instead of how big of a Taj Mahal can I do. We need to get back to reading. Let these kids learn to study. And I think what the Lord's going to do to us is he's going to lower the boom on us. There's a price to pay for this stupidity.
Well, there really is a dumbing down of America.
Yeah.
And if any of you, those of you who are interested in education, need to go up to the schools and follow what's going on. It's so easily covered. I know you interviewed Susie Schnell, and I had her on my show a couple of times as well.
Yeah, that was a fun interview.
Oh, sure. Susie, just so you know, she recognized that she came from California, and she came here and decided that
Thought she'd found Zion,
yeah, and that she didn't have
thought
these
it for about a year
terrible
and a
ideas.
half.
No dumbing down, no politically correct things, no socialist programs in the teachings, no Marxist teachings, and here it was throughout our valley.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is because they are attracting these wicked men of the world are attracting some of our brightest minds to come to Washington, D.C. We're going to present this program to you, and they make it sound so wonderful. And if you institute this, at some of the local colleges here, then you can bring in the teachers from the different schools, and you could teach them this program. And we're going to bring you back to Washington, D.C., and we're going to give you an award for this.
Yeah.
So you see, we have pride. We have people who, the Lord has warned us about this.
Well, the stupid Mormons, and I put myself in the same group, I'm one of us, we think, well, the schools can't teach Christianity. They can't teach the Ten Commandments. They can't teach the Bible. Mm-hmm. So we're going to do it without God. And we don't realize without God, these people are headed clear over into the humanist field.
Right. Mm-hmm.
That's where they've taken this. And they're right here. They're right here. And we're dumb as posts.
Well, it's not just us. It's I have a friend of mine. Her name is Dr. Vilma Zuliani, and she has about 3 doctorate degrees. Just absolutely brilliant woman who went through the Holocaust over in Italy, and she wanted to really get down and find out what was really going on. So she just became a teacher. She'd volunteered to be a teacher to work there for 6 months or fill in or whatever. And she said, I have never seen anything like what is going on in the schools. She's in Boston, and she's back east, and she's gone around. And she said, down where we used to have the 10 Commandments on the walls, everything, so that we literally understood God's laws almost by osmosis, even if we didn't go to church. They were there somewhere. And she says, today we have a poster. She said, big poster up, and you've got just 2 arms coming together holding hands from each side. One's black, one's white, and it says, when you have sex, remember to use a condom.
Yeah, yeah.
In other words, we're not teaching virtue. And what I feel bad about is that our generation is going to be responsible for not teaching this up-and-coming generation, and they are going to be under God's condemnation. So will we.
Yeah, I've used the illustration here on the show in past months of this same thing about everybody has a shotgun in the school. Everybody likes to use their shotgun. And so what does the school district do? They call people and say, now, we certainly hope you don't use your shotgun. It's a lot of fun. But if you do, we want you to make sure you get Kevlar vests. Here's how you can become bulletproof and not have to pay for stepping aside. And so, yeah, they're busy teaching abstinence, but the same thing you're saying. That's going right on the Alpine School District.
They're not teaching abstinence. they're handing out condoms in kindergarten in some places.
Yeah,
I
I don't think that's going on in.
Not in Utah.
No,
Maybe
it's
in
not
Utah.
here.
But
we're going through the pity endure embrace though as we keep going down the
Exactly.
humanist. Once
Exactly.
they've created enough chaos of a godless system, then we'll say, well, I guess we better do that.
Well, Hans, we're told so often that in the latter days that the LDS people will come under great condemnation from the government. And I say, why? I mean, what is it that we're going to be doing differently than the world? And maybe what you just said is part of that we're not doing that yet in Utah.
Yeah.
And we're not following these humanistic programs yet in Utah. And maybe that's
Well, we're putting up on our
what we'd be required to
school
do.
walls and using them for our placards. I know Susie talked about 32 of 35 sayings put up on the wall over at her son's junior high that were all socialist, humanist, atheist people in their sayings. And of course, they'd pick people, they wouldn't use a Karl Marx or a Mao, but they would use socialists and atheists that were not, their views were not known for what they were, humanists, and put them up as, hey, here's something you can believe in.
My daughter
know.
brought a book home from one of the local universities. And it was all about how Marxism was better than capitalism
Yeah,
and democracy. So it is being taught here.
yeah.
When I
Yeah,
read it, I nearly died. I thought,
yeah.
"Wait,
Most parents have no idea their children are being taken away from them. Their views don't meet the school's views, and
My friend,
we think we can do it 3 hours on Sunday, and the school's got 25 hours, and they're going to have a field day with these
just
little minds.
really quickly, let me tell you what Dr. Zuliani said. She said, we're sending our children to school dressed in our nice Oshkosh jeans and all their clothes, and they're losing their eternal souls there. And she's Catholic. That's what she said.
She's a Catholic,
Mm-hmm.
yet she sees it. Well, what a deal. Well, I hope on this school district thing, people start looking to other ways to save money. I remember one of my sons, he was going to a local high school, and he did a few things I didn't think he should do. And so I went over and visited each of his teachers, got his books, and I said, my son's not doing what he ought to be doing. I'm going to take him home and homeschool him. So I took him to my office. And he was taking typing, so I said, part of your typing is do input on my computer in my office of my client's work. Well, I found I could get him through all of his schoolwork in a couple of hours a day. It was fairly easy to do. And of course, now I was a parent who cared. And I remember my son saying, well, Dad, you don't want to do that. That'll embarrass the family. And about me taking him out, I said, son, you have the wrong daddy to think that you're going to embarrass me by me taking you out of that school.
Well, I
I said, this is a badge of honor to this daddy. I'm going to bring you home, and I'm going to make sure that you're doing what you ought to be doing and learning what you ought to be learning. And well, anyway, I was going to say we can read. He read the Book of Mormon. He couldn't do that in school. Well,
No,
he could
they
do it
sure
in seminary, where they try to offset the humanist philosophy and the godless. We never talk about God in here. Trust me.
Well, I took home, John and I adopted 9 children, and we had 24 foster children off and on.
Oh, yeah,
And we didn't take money for it. We did it because we wanted to train them to be responsible adults. And so we thought the best way was to work really hard and teach them to work. And so we bought a few properties and things that they had to help take care of so that they would learn the work ethic. I didn't ever want them to lean on the government when we could do it ourselves. That's so that we could keep our taxes down and so that the children could learn to be responsible, period.
Yeah.
But I know I got him had a year and a half. There's one child that came to our home that could not function in the school, just couldn't, too hyperactive, attention deficit, et cetera. So I thought, well, I'll just teach him at home for 6 months. He got ahead a year and a half of his class. And I thought, my goodness, there's something to be said for homeschooling. Not
Yeah.
that teachers aren't good, but there's just a lot in the class, and sometimes these children deemed
Well, Alpine School
unworthy of
District
school
averages
aren't.
27 students. And if
Yeah.
you go back on studies on this, if you get above 8 or 9 students in any class, the mental picture of the teacher, the mental picture of the student is I'm talking to a herd, and I'm part of a herd that's listening. In other words, you and I are looking at each other right now.
Mhm.
We're paying attention. We're listening.
Mhm.
You can maintain that same type of an attitude of paying attention with 8 or 9 people. But once you get above that, it's like a mental switch goes on that says, I am part of a herd. He's not talking to me.
But Hans, you're making a case for bigger schools. Do you agree with all these massive bigger schools that we're doing?
No, I think what we need to do is bring people home. We need to put them into homeschool like you did, do what I did, and get back to the basics. Get back to the basics. We can't afford to do all this stuff. We can't afford to. I mean, I look at what's going on with the school districts, with the city down here, with this thing. They're like Nero. Let's light up Rome and then play the fiddle. They have no idea they're destroying this whole community, and yet they just keep doing it. And they're just playing their fiddles. They live in their nice homes and think the little people out there will certainly accept more taxes, more socialism.
But Hans, I don't think, in all honesty, I mean, I've lived in poor areas, rich areas, whatever. I don't really see people as doing this evil knowingly. At least it doesn't appear to be that way. It's kind of like that frog story,
I think they
about
mean well.
where you put them in cold water and you turn up the heat and gradually, and I think that's what happens is we get sucked into things, and there are a lot of lobbyists out there that can pull us astray, especially if citizens don't let them know what their opinion is. We elect them and then we just leave them sit. We don't go get behind them. We don't say, hey, this is what we really want done. Will you help us to do this? The only one that's getting anything done is those who are going to benefit financially from it.
Right.
That are there.
They're the ones that show up.
People. So
and that's
we're
why
responsible.
That's why the 34.3% in Utah that showed up, a lot of them,
right.
They wanted the fun and games. They're the golf course people, people living out of the trough, government employees, people that want, bigger schools. People that, I mean, that's what's going to happen next year. I'd bet you $1. Well, you're not a betting person. I'm not either. But to use the phrase loosely, we're going to have another $230 million debt. We're going to have another $230 million in a year from now on November, whatever.
And you're talking about here in
Alpine School District.
Wow. Okay. And we don't even know what our state debt is going to be.
Oh, yeah, the state, they're doing the same thing, too. They're all hiding. They're like California, $18 billion deficit this year, and they're asking the federal government to come and bail them out. Well, we're smaller. The hammer hasn't hit us as hard as it has a lot of other states. But our people, they're still blind as bats.
Well, willfully blind, deaf, and dumb. That's how horrible
my dad used
people.
To say
I know there are good people out there, really,
Yeah.
but truly, sometimes we are kind of willfully blind,
Yeah.
deaf, and dumb. We
Like
we don't
Alpine
always
School
look.
District, you know what they collect per student?
What?
Taxes. It's over $5,600 per student.
From the taxpayers?
Yeah. It's over $5,600 per student in the Alpine School District. That's a lot of money.
It is.
Can you imagine how many people would be homeschooling their kids if I said, I'm going to send you $5,600 for every child you keep home? We're not going to have to spend all this money on these big, huge schools. We're going to find another way to do this. We'll use computers. We'll use homeschool. We'll use half day at school and half day at home. We're not going to build these big, huge schools. We don't need it.
Have you seen the attack on homeschoolers?
Oh, yeah. It's ongoing. It's ongoing.
Yes, constantly. And there are some who abuse it. But for the majority are pretty good people.
Yeah.
And they want their children to be educated in the right way.
Yeah, the children of parents who don't care are going to do as well at homeschool, doing nothing as going to school and sitting there and not knowing anything either.
That's right.
Because you can get fairly good grades if you just show up.
I think what bothers me, Hans, and maybe I'm wrong, but I had a person who actually worked in the school board offices and said that a lot of times these people go in, shut their doors, and they're raking in, a 6-figure salary, and they're not doing anything.
Yeah.
I mean, is our money going to the schoolrooms? Are they going to the teachers? Are they going to the students? Or are we wasting a lot of money on big buildings and new programs, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah. Well, that's why I say they get back to the basics. You could have students in there half the time that they're in there, and that'd cut down the demand for more schools, instead of saying let's just build more schools and keep everything we've got going, every program we've got going. We're not going to cut one single thing. Their idea is, if I cut everything that's going on 5% or 10%, that's a cut. Well, that's not going to cut it, especially when they're over here saying, look at all the sacrifices we're doing over here. And over here they're saying $200 million. Now here's another $230 million. Now here's another $230 million. That's not cutting.
Do you know what the excuse was to me when I said this to some people? They said, Donna, you don't understand. The world is not the same today as it was when you were younger.
Yeah.
You know, we have to have places to have our children go because they don't have places to go. And what ones are there are so expensive we can't afford to send our kids there.
Yeah. Well, we need to send them home.
Just stay home.
There'll be more. Yeah. Send them home.
Okay.
Have mama talk
That's
to them.
not all bad, really, truly.
No, have mama spend time with them. Have daddy spend time with them. You know, get them out of these schools. I mean, well, get on my rant here. But I hope, well, we're about out of time here. But I know I like you. This has been fun.
Oh, thanks, Hans.
Got some familiar spirits here. But people, I hope that you will not have so much faith in your city officials and in your school district and in your federal people that you'll just keep letting them do what they're doing. And don't think they're smarter than you.
That's right.
When they're spending 43 cents of every dollar borrowed money last year, 39% of every dollar this year at the federal level, and we got the school district going up, 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 and people, I mean, you know, to me it's like Rome and their circuses. We got to keep people's minds off what's really going on.
We need to be responsible. And, you know, again, please, we're not attacking the schools. We're not attacking the teachers. We're not attacking the administration. We're just saying there's a lot of waste out there and that there are some things that can be done by each and every one of us if we're responsible parents.
Yeah.
And if we're responsible taxpayers. You know, we complain about taxes, yet we do not go down. We don't go. Nobody goes and listens to the county commission or the city commission when they have their meetings. I watch it on TV. You know, for me, I sit and watch on TV, but there's hardly anybody in the audience. So are we then not responsible, Hans, for the position that we're in?
Yeah, it's repeating my father again here. We brought it on ourselves. Unfortunately, with a representative form of government, the dangers, we get exactly what we deserve.
Well, we can't get mad at our city and county and state leaders if we do nothing to let them know what we're thinking.
Yeah.
You know, that's total irresponsibility as a citizen. It's no wonder, who was it? Was it John Adams that walked out? And so the lady asked him, what kind of government you have? And he says, a republic.
Oh, it was Franklin.
Franklin.
It's a republic if you can keep it.
Right.
Yeah.
And republic requires diligence.
Yeah.
And we are not diligent people.
I know Thomas Jefferson, one of his writings, I've got a 20-volume set of him I've read a few times. Great stuff. Great stuff. But he talked about the greatest protection for our republic was a lot of juries, so that the citizens are actively involved in evaluating the laws and the application of the law.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a question here real quick. What do you think about having term limits for judges?
Well, you know, I really haven't.
You haven't thought about it? Because when you brought up that, having juries and whatever, you know, once a judge gets in, it's very hard to get them out. What about term limits so that we can make sure we don't have a lot of activist judges?
Well, if we're dealing with stupid people coming and going, it probably wouldn't solve the problem any more than term limits with congressmen and senators. My joke about that is Joseph Smith was opposed to term limits, and his argument was that we shouldn't throw a good man out who's there and let the people decide whether he's good or bad, which goes back to our representatives are representatives of the morals of the people.
Yeah, but we have the story in Mosiah about the king, where he says, well, you can't get a bad king out because then he surrounds himself with his friends and
bad people.
And bad people, and therefore
well, I wonder how long
entrenched.
It would take. I saw this thing on the news about the Tea Party was holding a meeting with the new congressman that would come to their thing at the same time the House was, you know, the Republican leadership and the Democratic leaders, and the observation they were making is they're going to corrupt these people, and they haven't even been sworn in yet. They're going to show them, okay, here's your way around town. Here's how you get money for your campaign. Here's how you're going to get reelected. Here are the special interest groups. Here's the way it works. And so I used to think, well, term limits would probably be a benefit for about 2 months. And by then they'd have their way. They'd know the way around. They'd be as corrupt as the rest of them. If you don't have moral people, you're not gonna be a winner. Well, folks, we're running out of time here, but I want you to think about this fullness of iniquity. I think we're doing what the people from the days of Noah did, the Jaredites, the Mulekites, the Nephites, the Israelites. We're going to wreck ourselves. And this fullness of iniquity, it's going to hit this land worse than any other, because that's the way the Lord has always done it. Wake up, talk to your friends, talk to your family members. Try and stop this thing. Stop the debt. You look at your neighbors. Do you want your school district mortgaged to the hilt, your city mortgaged to the hilt? When you look around you in church and you see people losing their homes, who's losing? Well, people that aren't out of debt. Who's suffering? Who's having a struggle? People that aren't out of debt. And that advice that our prophet gives us, it's true for the schools. It's true for the counties, the cities. Stop these people. Stop them, because they're not smart enough to stop themselves. They're doing the Roman thing, play the fiddle while the place burns down. Don't let them do it, because they do not see what you and I see. Get out of debt and stay out of debt. Well, Ruby, I guess we're finished.
It's been fun. Thank you so much.
Hey, I'm glad you came in today. This has been fun.
Thank you very much. I know that Hans would welcome any alternate opinions out there to come in and then talk with them. You just have to give him a call. What can they call you? It's just down here?
Yeah, 224-1414. Give us a call here. Hey, we'll see you here next week. Say your prayers, pay your tithing, attend church, and look out, brother. We'll get what we deserve. Thank you, and have a good day.
I'm sorry, I think I talked too much.
No, that's what I wanted you here for.
The preceding was a paid commercial program. Opinions expressed are the sole responsibility of the party expressing them.
1400 K-Star is KSRR Provo.